Right, now we have had the local board, I think we've got Alex and Richard have been waiting patiently for what probably feels like 100 hours to them to present on the Central Library, item 10. Right, kia ora Richard, can you hear us? We can't hear you, you just might have to unmute.
Right, unmuted now?
We can hear you, yep. And if Alex, if you're speaking.
Thanks. So obviously, this was a major strategic analysis of a major facility in our area. But the office's recommendations do not, in our opinion, address some of the key principles and criteria that should be applied for future planning for a central library. And the Waitemata Local Board has therefore added in its resolution 6 key points that we urge that you also, either in the same form or in a similar form, add to the resolutions in order to form a comprehensive and holistic response. Basically, central libraries have been the heart of civilized cities since the time of the Great Library of Alexandria 2,300 years ago. And they have remained as a place for books and records centrally for civilised places ever since. When I was first elected to the Auckland City Council in 1970, the issue came up of the building of the second stage of the Central Library, and a number of the councillors said, the age of the library is dead, the digital is the future, and we should keep on that site the Embassy Picture Theatre as more important long-term culturally. Now, both films and books and libraries have changed, but the libraries have adapted better and become more essential. And we as a board don't think the value for money criteria that's been applied is the most appropriate one. Alex will talk about this. We either need to develop more holistic criteria, because I don't think that it would ever score enough, but at some stage a modernised library is going to be required. When I was on the council, the civic car park roof developed a serious leak, and it was agreed to do a major review of that area, and there was a serious look at building the central library on Aotea Square, preferably on the southern side. The Sky City area was really active at that time, and it was not pursued. But now it's largely derelict. It's up for sale and development, that area. It's going to be central to the Waihorokau station, and it's worth having a look at seeing that whether a library could be included in a major private development on that site. If we're looking, it won't be an opportunity that ever arises again to utilise that site for library purposes. That's our D. We want you to look at that. E is a statement about public appreciation library service that Alex will talk to. In terms of H, our H, we can't delay too long on making a long-term decision on the future of the library. There's currently a relatively small risk, but it will increase substantially over time, that major damage, a collapse or decay that would put it out of service. It's happened to us with the Lees Institute Library, and people can put up with that for a number of years to get that right. But if it happened to the Central Library, it was put out of operation, there would be a temptation to do a quick fix solution so that you'd get up and have a central library again. The planning should be started for the long term about what is going to be required. And that to overcome that risk of being caught short of not having an effective central library. Our I points out that there's currently a projected gap in the 10-year budget in support of the development, the maintenance of the library. Now that the decision is about, you're about to make a decision that in the next 10 years it will be basically a status quo option. You need, in the long-term plan, to put in enough money to ensure a quality central library, properly maintained and on that site. And that's something that should be recorded now. There is also a reminder that we've added to what is our J3 of the broad and important range of services and uses that library provides, really broad, that are not really entirely covered in that. And in addition to what we put in the resolution, there are heritage collections of absolutely stunning international significance. The Alexander Dumas originals are the most important collection of his work outside of Paris. And there, of course, there's the George Gray collection. So that, in addition to the points we put in point 3, we believe that you ought to endorse to ensure that they're all taken into account. This is a place for families, for children, for vulnerable and homeless people. The homeless people annoy some people, but it is a place of safety for them. The children annoy some people, but it's also a place of safety for them. Alex, if you could expand on some of the points. Give her a couple of minutes.
Happy to move an extension.
We don't need to. Alex.
Thank you. I'll be very quick. I just wanted to draw your attention to the report, which is very, very thorough, but it's based on assumptions which are admitted by those who made the report, that there is zero benefit to non-users in having a library in the city centre. And I think that is an extraordinary assumption, bearing in mind American researchers show that living close to a library adds $10,000 to the value of your house. You know, libraries are place-making. They add value. They are places of identity. They are very, very important. And if we were not to have a library, that is just not acceptable, really, to the people who live in Waitemata, often in very, very small accommodations. It's an extension of their life where everybody absolutely is welcome. Richard has spoken about the importance of holding our heritage collections and our past knowledge, but they're also places of research and exploring the ideas of the future. There was recent research with children in Waitemata. They would very much like to have a robot who will read to them in the library. And I think a future library could absolutely be exploring some of the tech ideas of the future and be quite an extraordinary place. So we would be very appreciative, even if there's not much money now, to start thinking about a future library and to keep it on in the long-term plan. Thank you.
Very succinct, thank you. Right, do we have questions for the local board on this one? Councillor Ferry.
Thanks. I'm really interested in this idea about the non-user value for a library, and I would find it useful if you would expand on that a little bit in the context of the central city. And I guess also, is a non-user just someone who doesn't take books out? Because there's a whole lot of uses of a library that don't involve taking a book out. So maybe if you could expand on that a little bit more and the role that the central city library plays, because it is a little bit different from a lot of the suburban libraries.
I am grateful that there are staff behind me who can entirely explain their methodology, but they do talk a lot about less use of library cards, but I know many, many people who use the library to study, to change their babies, to find some children's books, read them right there, then put them back on the shelves. So the fact that you haven't used your library card, I think, is no indicator that you don't use the library in various ways.
Thank you. I don't think we have any other question. Oh, right, Councillor Walker, sorry.
Sure. My question goes like this. I mean, essentially, the library, as it started, was built on philanthropy. It was built on the fantastic gift from Sir George Gray, And it was also built on the philanthropic donations of many Aucklanders that enabled the library that currently is the art gallery to be erected. And one of the first steps was a visioning process and so on. Quite obviously, there was identification of future needs and the like. So do you think that at the very least we should be developing the concepts and what a library might look like that's future fit for purpose? And sure, we might not have the money, but if you look back, we've actually never had the money for these sorts of things, and that includes this building that we're in. We didn't have the money. The council at the time didn't have the money, but Auckland found the money, and that's what enabled it. And the question is really one for Auckland and less for this council, in my opinion, but we could facilitate it. Do you want to answer that?
Councillor, you're quite right. There was huge public appetite for a library in the 19th century, and Governor Grey, I believe, made it as a condition of his gift that the council would actually put up a building, knowing that there's never enough money and hard choices have to be made. And the library has been very loved since, and I believe there were silk scarves and a brass band on the day that it opened. And we love it still. It was the highest individual category on our local board feedback of what they wanted to keep funding for.
Thank you, Alex.
Is that a yes to everything I said?
Yeah. But we'll need your help too.
Councillor Lee, last question. Thank you.
Thank you. And I certainly share the sentiments of colleagues in the Waitemata Local Board in supporting and underlining the absolute importance of the central library to the city. And it's not really a local asset as such, it's certainly in my ward and in the local board area, but it's a regional asset. It's central for the whole region actually, and its historical importance and the value of its collections have been mentioned. I'm just a little bit concerned about what's going on here. A range of options, including presumably demolishing the present library and building a completely new one, which, given the constraints we're evidently under, I wonder why that's necessary at all. The fact of the matter is, this is a relatively new library building as such. The old Auckland Library used to be in the building which is now the art gallery, and Councillor Board Member Northey will remember that. And this library building was opened in 1972, and it's a very solid structure. It's been through a couple of major renovations, so I'm just wondering why there's even thought of replacing it. So I would suggest I would support option one, but I object to...
Oh, hang on, Councillor Lee. This is just questions to the local board, and then we're going to have the staff come...
I'm not questioning the local board.
I know that.
Okay.
So so we're just... This part is just questioning the local board. Then we're going to have the staff come up for the item, and then we can...
Oh, okay. Shall we put a little intermission in my oration? We'll come back to it.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Absolutely perfect. Right, so I'll take that as Councillor Lee, and Councillor Ferry would like to second a vote of thanks for the Waitemata Local Board, who will be obviously here for the debate. Thank you. All those in favour? Anyone opposed? Perfect. Thank you. Right, we'll have staff come up. Who have we? The list of Nancy, Carol, Louise. Thank you. Nice to see you all.
Tēnā koutou, ko Nancy Chu tōku ingoa, Principal Policy Advisor from Community and Social Policy. Thank you for having me here. We've put out a paper with Connected Communities, so may I introduce Louise Lahet, Principal Advisor from Connected Communities, and also my manager, Carol Kenner, Senior Manager of Community and Social Policy. You've received a video presentation that goes into details of the key findings and the recommendations. A link to the presentation is included in the agenda report. So today I'll just give a 2-minute quick summary and go straight to questions. The report in front of you presents the findings of the indicative business case for the Central Library. It builds on an investigation report in 2020. 4 options were previously approved by the committee. The indicative business case further develops the options and assesses them against 6 critical success factors. The recommendation is not to progress the options to remodel the existing facility or build a new facility. That's options 2, 3, and 4 in the report. To detail business case because they do not provide value for money. Service can continue to be delivered in the current facility under option 1, the status quo, but it is not a viable long-term solution. The current facility has several issues and a high risk profile. As the next step, we recommend developing a service plan to actively manage and plan for central library services to Aucklanders over the next 50 years. The service plan will support decision-making by presenting adapted pathways, allowing for flexibility to respond to changes, opportunities, and challenges in the future, considering triggers for intervention such as cost to serve and risks. We've workshopped our findings and recommendations with the local board and been to their business meeting on the 18th of April. Overall, they support our recommendations, but of course, as you've heard from the members previously, they're concerned about the renewal costs and also like the issues to be addressed through the service plan. We're happy to take questions now or just clarify on the non-use questions before, if you would like to. Thank you.
Cool, we'll go. Oh, sorry. Yeah, so we'll go back to Councillor Lee to your question. You can start wherever you would like or paraphrase what you said.
I just wonder why this is even on the agenda at all, given the budgetary constraints we are told we are under. The library building, which apparently does not reflect Auckland's unique cultural identity, the building, certainly not the library, which does, is one of the reasons why its future is under question, which is absurd, really. The library is fit for purpose. I have some views about the library being a regular user of that going back years, but in regards to the options, there's an option 1, do minimum, which is kind of in a way pejorative. It should be option 1, do is what is necessary to maintain a perfectly good building with a highly reputable library, which is one of the successful aspects of the whole super city amalgamation. It's very hard to find any success stories in the super city, in my opinion, but the library is certainly one of them. We should be very proud of. And rather than constantly minimising the presentation of books that are available on shelves, they should be brought back to where they were, that books are prominent in our central library. That's all I have to say. Thank you.
Sorry, is there any question here or not quite clear?
I guess what I think I've heard is kind of would you like to move option 1, which is effectively what?
I'm happy to move that, Mr. Chair.
Yes. So I guess maybe the question at the beginning was it does say in the report, but if you want to just clarify for where this has come from and why the review had to be done.
So through you, Mr. Chair, the reason for this report is presented in paragraph 11 on page 43. We have a previous resolution from the PACE committee and agreement for 4 options to go forward to indicative business case. The investigation provided a very thorough investment logic map with problem definition, and the investment logic map is also presented in the report here in front of you on page 45. Thank you.
So just, I guess, to clarify, maybe it's not as clear in the officer's recommendation, but the officer's recommendation is option 1. And it goes, the resolutions talk about why options 2, 3, 4 are not appropriate.
That's correct.
I would just question do minimum. I think that is not exactly helpful. I think do what is necessary would be better wording than minimum. Minimum almost suggests planned neglect, and I'm sure that's not what the officers have in mind.
So the typical language for status quo is do nothing. For indicative business case, it's a standard language. And in this case, because there's significant renewal cost to maintaining the facility, we decided to alter the language and call the status quo do minimum. And the minimum, as you can see, is over $30 million over a 20-year period.
En fait nécessaire.
Right, okay, so we have a mover and a seconder. We'll continue with questions, but just to be clear, the officer's recommendation is the option 1, but it does include the need for us to consider how we will fund the significant renewal cost over the 10-year budget. So I think even the roof alone a year ago was over $10 million. So there are significant costs to have the building, but that's, I think, why we had to do the review, to see if it was worth continuing to renew, and that's what you've settled on. So, Deputy Mayor was the seconder. Councillor Foley.
Kia ora, thank you, Chair. I think that's cleared it up, because I was going to ask a similar question around, I think it's the way you've worded the recommendations that you should have started, that you recommend option 1 and then go from there, and that would have made it a little clearer. So I'm happy with that, Chair, and I'm just sort of noting, because we were talking a little bit about it, that probably lots of our libraries around the Motu need attention, and I'm mindful of the libraries in my area where it leaks every time it rains, at the Otara Library and the Tupu Youth Library. So, whereas I've used this library a lot when I was a student many moons ago, and it's still in really, really good condition compared to our ones out south. Kia ora.
Kia ora. If we can go questions, Councillor Ferry.
Yeah, thank you. I'd just like to follow up on that user, non-user piece of information we were talking about before. And I guess I'm particularly looking for some reassurance that in the service delivery plan work that, you know, we're not going to be drawing an unhelpful distinction that skews things. So did you want to comment a bit on how you measure that? You know, what constitutes a non-user versus a user, and you know, are we capturing those uses where, you know, someone doesn't get a book out with a library card? Thanks.
Thank you, through the chair. So the benefits are calculated using this willingness to pay method. It's quite a commonly used method for measuring benefits for community facilities, especially with a social element. So it's survey-based. People in the statistically significant pool of sample will ask how much they're willing to pay to have a service, either they use it or just having it in the community. And then the value is multiplied by the expected number of people who are expected to be visiting the Central Library in the future under option 2, 3, and 4. So I hope that answers your question. So it is an element that we've considered in our report. In terms of your second questions about the service plan, yeah, we are confident that through the service plan, we will have a more pragmatic and more strategic look at all the problems and issues well in advance in a timely manner. So what it does is that we will have adapted pathways which will allow us to look at all the problems and as well as opportunities in the longer time horizon over 50 years. We will have a bit better oversight of when they're going to happen, and then we'll have different triggers and signals well in advance, which will allow us to have decision-making and actions before any serious problems occur. And that could include the issues we discussed before. So triggers can be when the renewal costs come to a certain level or when visitation drop to a certain level. Hope that answers your questions.
Yes, just to follow up then. So in terms of the service delivery plan, I think I'm using the right language there, service plan, yes. Will that take into account that this library is a little bit different from a lot of our other libraries? So I used to work for the Mount Roskill Library back in the Auckland City days, and that was, you know, it's the mothership, or was then, in terms of the network across the old Auckland City. It also has a role in terms of hosting events and things like that. So will all of that be captured? We're not looking at this like it's another, you know, I mean, Mount Roskill Library is my favourite, just putting that out there. But it has a different function, or it has some different functions in the central library than it does from, say, the Mount Roskill or Mount Albert or Epsom or wherever. So will that be captured and taken on board? Because I think that's a really important part of this particular library, that it's not botany, it's not Takapuna. Yeah.
The answer is yes. Yeah, it will be considered.
Good, thank you. Councillor Watson.
Yeah, just along this theme of what was it, do nothing or do not too much or whatever it is. In other libraries, and I know one of the libraries in my ward, which is meant to be one of the busiest libraries in Auckland, they tell us, at East Coast Bays, they did a modest refurbishment for I don't know what it was, a few $1 million, which was quite a big deal. My library was shut for a while, but it spruced it up. It looks a lot better now than it was. Is that included within this 34.5 million? I realise about 12 million of it is budgeted for. The other 24 hasn't been yet. Is that part of the possibility here, where things get moved around a bit and whatever's done to upgrade or modern, a bit like you do in your house, is that within that budget? It is. Okay.
Yeah, so fit outs is included in
Great.
that renewal budget.
Okay, so Mr. Chair, just to continue the theme, I think, of Councillor Lee and Fully and a few others, it is our most significant library. It has incredible usage across from students, people off the street. It's a real eclectic mix, but it is a comfortable, enjoyable place to be in. So in light of the strong bones, I just really want to just dig a bit down on these risks. Now, Councillor Hills mentioned the roof. Is it a leaky building? Does it leak?
Through the chair, the building was a leaky building. We spent a significant amount of money replacing the entire roof to prevent those leaks from coming in. There are still fundamental design issues such as internal guttering, which mean that there is still an element of risk there. There are part of the study was a comprehensive building condition assessment, which identified any areas of risk. So we know, for instance, that there's no issue with earthquake strengthening, but there are other issues that need addressing. The other part of the renewals that's quite different, and this speaks to what Councillor Ferry was talking about this building being very different, is that because we have a heritage collection stored here, there are significant HVAC, fire suppression and other elements that are far more expensive than an ordinary library building or other sort of building.
So just to finish off there, so the roof has been A substantial amount of money has been invested fixing up the roof. There's still a few things that have to be done by the sounds of things in terms of gutting. Okay, well, I must say I'm much encouraged by the state of the Auckland Central Library and the recommendation as a consequence, particularly if it includes that modest upgrade and refurbishing as we go along. I think it should last for a few more years.
Yeah, maybe I won't speak for the officers, but I kind of think, I hope we're not taking the wrong end of the stick, that I think it's the issues that came through. There was a $10 million, roof replacement, other things happened. There was the need to review, are these kind of things going to keep popping up? So I think what you've done is kind of narrowed down, like, yes, we feel this is a viable community asset for the foreseeable. We just need to ensure we plan and put in the 10-year budget the right amount of renewal funding, which is currently not funded, to ensure it continues. We continue to invest in it. So there was no, I guess my question is, there was no assumption that you wanted to close or demolish, or, yeah, I think maybe if that could be clarified.
Thanks for the question. So I guess we do not recommend option 1 as the best option. We are left in a situation when option 2, 3, and 4 are not viable options. So that's quite a difference. The current facility is not just a matter of a new paint color and a few new seats. There are quite significant issues with that facility, and we've gone through a lot of detail and listed those issues. The visitation is dropping, and we think that the location and the attractiveness of the facility is a key issue, that we're not reaching the audience that we would normally. So what we're recommending is that at the moment, we're able to continue the services in the current facility, assuming that renewals can be carried out in a timely manner. But in the long term, another solution or solutions would be needed, and that's what the service plan would be looking into. So looking at triggers and responses. When do we need to consider, and it might just be in 10, 15, 20 years or longer, when do we need to consider an asset closure? Is the asset going to fail? Is there too much cost to run the facility? So all those questions is the things that we want to look into as part of the service plan. I hope that answers your question.
Right, but as far as we can ascertain from this, the community knows that within the 10-year budget, we're not changing it. There's no plan to change its use or remove the library from that space.
That's correct.
Thank you. Right, Member Ashby.
Kia ora, thank you for the report. My question just concerns, I know there was iwi engagement, and out of that were views expressed by several iwi in terms of their, saw their role as kaitiaki of the space and of the taonga within it, and you developed 6 sort of criteria. Could you please explain to me how those, I guess, 6 values are expressed or ensured within option 1, and if they aren't, which option best gives effect to the engagement from mana whenua?
Yeah, thank you to the chair. So as you mentioned before, we have engaged with kaitiaki and also mana whenua and iwi and the region, and also Matawaka. So the 6 principles were developed and went back for feedback. We see the process is ongoing, so it's not just guiding the development of the indicative business case, but also any process following up from this. In terms of your specific questions about whether it informed option 1, no, it doesn't, because option 1 is the status quo, but it has helped us further develop option 2, 3, and 4, and it definitely play an important role in helping our architects for their feasibility study, and then their feasibility study, of course, then inform the costing and the cost-benefit analysis. Hope that answers your question.
Yeah, thank you. Just a quick follow-up one then. If it hasn't informed the option, but it's informed your future planning, I guess within your service plan as you go forward in the financial package, I'm taking from what you've said that that feedback will be implemented as much as is fiscally possible. So, for example, presumably some of the lessons learned from other examples around, bilingual and bicultural practices and things. So that can be within that service plan envelope. Right, thank you.
Kia ora, thank you. Councillor Walker, last question. Thank you.
Sure. So, a couple of questions. Just in respect of the library, and I must confess I haven't read the business case and the like, but I will do that. Have we projected out the increase in demand that we're likely to have, given that the Aotea station is just across the way, and that's going to be by far and away the busiest transport node in New Zealand? There's talk of light rail. It may be talk, but even if there isn't light rail, there will be other forms of transport. There could be some form of bus transport or the like that replaces it. So the consequences, I'm assuming there'll be a lot more demand there. Have you factored that?
Yeah, thank you, Councillor. So the question about future demand is something we've gone into quite a lot of consideration. The world post-COVID is highly unpredictable, and of course we don't have a crystal ball. So we've made sure that we use the most readily available data and also sought advice from the experts. So we've had a look at the world trend post and pre-COVID, and also looking at the central library visitation pre and post-COVID, and also how the user behaviors change over time. And we've talked to the library insight team, who is very knowledgeable in forecasting demand in the future, as well as our chief economist unit, who is, of course, keeping a close eye on the economic activities in the central city, especially what's the impact of the
Sure.
CRL and the residents.
So just further to this, I mean, does your forecasting take into account effectively the civic precinct we've got that includes this building that's not going to go away, the Aotea Square, the Aotea Centre, the Civic Theatre, no doubt the refurbished St James Theatre that will happen, and the predominance from a civic perspective that all of those things, together with the Aotea rail station and the like, will have. So does that information inform your locational analysis and the case for the location?
So the chair, so I refer to page 29 of the indicative business case, where we look at the summary impacts of the city rail link. We also did, for our visitation analysis, we also look at a 30 minutes catchment from the central library, and recognizing that with transport infrastructure improvement, the 30-minute catchment could be larger than what it is now. So that's one thing. We also looked at what a remodeled or new library would do to increase visitation, and we looked at case studies. So there's very little information about impact of new investment in visitation, but we were able to find some studies, and we based our projection based on that.
Thank you. Right, that's...
Chair, if I may just, I don't know if it's a point of order, but perhaps a point of clarification. I'm just looking at the quorum that you've got for your committee. I just need to travel to an appointment now. I'll be able to come back online, Chair, but I just want to ask, will the quorum be maintained if I leave and dial back on?
yes, so it'd be great if you dial back on when you're when you've safely reached a destination.
Okay.
But we look like we've got quorum for now. We'll just get through this. So thank you, Councillor. Thank you, officers. We appreciate all the work you've done on this, and we will head now to the debate. So thank you. Right, Councillor Watson.
Mr. Chair, I won't prolong matters here too much, but I guess just wanted to say a couple of things, particularly, as a representative of one of the far-flung centres of the council empire. I just want to say how important the Central Library is for all of Auckland. Anyone who's been in any of the tertiary institutions, Auckland University, AUT, you kind of flit between the University Library and the Auckland Public Library, and that's been a service that has served generations of Aucklanders east, west, south and north. So I want to make it really clear that it is on a status and on a pedestal that really distinguishes it as one of our most valuable buildings. So I wanted to say that first of all. As far as the location goes, the present location, in my view, is excellent, because you have that proximity to those same institutions, all in a walking space. It's hard for me to think of a location that would be better than that. So I chuck that in for what it's worth. In terms of visitation goes, whenever I go to that library, it's chocker. It's, I don't know, if that's it on lower visitation, I'd hate to see it at the peak, because there's people from all over there, as across there today. And if ever there's a council facility that captures the essence of Auckland, it's the Auckland Public Library, yet for the most part manages to do that in a very friendly, welcoming way. And the staff there are excellent, are very helpful, no matter what you come in to ask them for. As far as priorities of budgets going forward, and I support the option that Councillor Lee's put up, but in terms of the huge investment in the city centre, the massive investment in the city centre, all over the city centre, for me, if there would be a priority, it would be the Auckland Public Library in terms of funding going forward. And I think we should perhaps, in the past, philanthropists have been great sort of heroes of Auckland, whether it's in arts or wherever it might be. And, I know that's a kind of hopeful thing to chuck out, sometimes dance to the desperates, but I think despite that, there's a chance to explore that option, particularly, when you think of people like Owen Glenn, what he's done up at the Auckland University. So just finally, Mr. Chair, I hope, and I'm, really would like to see the use of the budget that is there is to improve what is a great building, which is a solid building, but it can obviously be spruced up and can be made more attractive, and that's important. And I'd hope that budget goes a long way to do it. If it doesn't, then I'm certainly indicating here a willingness to consider how that might be more effectively spent in the future to preserve the wonderful building and the services that are supplied at our library, our central library. Thank you.
Kia ora, thank you. Thank you, Councillor. Deputy Mayor Simpson.
Thanks, Chair. Look, I will be brief too. Councillor Lee, well done. Thank you. I'm very happy to support this. I actually don't like it. It's not what I want to do, but I think it's a pertinent decision for what we have to do, considering our situation at the moment. It is only a short to medium term, and at some stage, the people who sit round this table, probably well after me, will have to make a different call. But I think the staff have done an amazing job considering the constraints of which they work in, fiscally, I'm saying. I don't think there's one person who sits around this table, or indeed in Auckland, that doesn't value what our central library does and is for the people, not just within the community of the central city and the Waitemata area, but the wider Auckland area. It is an amazing place, and the people who work in there are fantastic, welcoming to everyone, regardless of whether they're in there to do library work or not, actually. So in seconding this, I just think it is, I want to just draw attention to the fact that we have to watch our renewals around this. This only works if we keep up with our renewal program. So happy to support. Thank you to our library people. You're actually fantastic. One of the best assets we have in the city. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Councillor Walker.
Yes, I'm certainly one of the small team, happy to stand in the breach for the library. I make a few observations, and they won't be lost on Mr. Dogood, who's a planner, and that is the astronomical increase in population that is occurring in the central city area, both in terms of the transient population, in terms of people that are going to be staying in hotels and the like, but also, I do not doubt, the increasing number of students and others that are living in the central city. And this follows on from what is happening and has happened in other cities such as Melbourne. And the consequence is that many of those people, and regretfully not too many of them are going to be at the affordable housing level. A number of those people will be people like some of the councillors here that are quite erudite, and I'm looking at Councillor Henderson, for example, and Councillor Bartley, and all of us. We've got a few clues, we read books and the like, we absorb information. People are going to have more time on their hands to do that, and that is one of the things that's happening in society, as frankly, people are going to be working less, and they're going to be recreating more, and they'll be reading more, and the like. So I think that if we do some foresighting and some backcasting, we'll realise increasingly that libraries, and especially this library, has got an increasingly important part to play. I emphasised in my questioning the locational attributes of the library. The whole centre of gravity is going to move up Queen Street to this area, and that'll be exemplified by the Aotea station. So I think that this library has got a marvellous role. I'm disturbed that it's got internal guttering, and that's an ongoing concern, and maybe we need to spend some more money to deal with that, because we're going to have bigger rainfall events. That concerns me. But what does concern me more than anything is we need some vision, and we should not be constrained by the fact that our budget doesn't sustain it, because it's been Auckland's budget that has always enabled the creation of these sorts of civic features of our city. So we need to do some work around that, and we should be putting that sort of vision up. And I'm mindful that if we clawed back a small amount, a tiny amount of money by way of development contributions and the like from all this development that's occurring in the central city, and I'm sure Mr. Dogood will be onto that, we'd probably pay for a new library, or the refurbishment of this library, sometimes over. Can we do that? That's the question.
Thank you, Councillor. And yes, thank you to the staff for this report. It's very clear that I can read between the lines, and it's a little bit of throwing us the challenge to ensure we fund the renewals properly for the long-term use of this library. And if that is not something we plan for, then we need to plan an exit strategy, because of the major issues that come about on a building that is this large and quite a complex building too, with inside and outside needs. I know that the roof was sort of ended up being an emergency situation almost to replace that, but as Councillor Walker might not know, but the issues with the guttering and the amount of water it takes were mitigated by Healthy Waters working with Mana Whenua, the local board, and others around a green roof. I think there's 2,000 plants up there now, and pretty significant celebrated project that was part of the library's roof development. So that has reduced the stormwater quite significantly going through those internal gutters, which will still create issues going forward. But I think that clearly this is a challenge put to us. The local board too are clear, and I'm sure the local community. I've only really been to the Central Library for many events, so I haven't been there to get out books. I've been for there as community hub, as the many events that the library staff and other organisations and community groups put on in that space. So it is a hub for the city of people from all backgrounds, and it needs to continue that way. But we do need to be putting those budgets in our 10-year plan, so the library staff and community facilities team and others know what is going to happen long term, so we don't get the shocks of large spend when we don't have a plan to do so. Right, we have a mover and a seconder. All those in favour?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? No? Perfect. Now we have, was that okay with? Yes. Yep, so we have a bit of precedent of business. Councillor Williamson asked if we could possibly move The item 14, the Pakuranga Golf Club.
As the Duke of Lancaster said, as the 100-year war's about to begin, this won't last long, I hope.
Yes, so it sounds like I've got a mover. And oh, right, okay. All right.
So let's just wait for the staff.
No, sorry. I thought I was having to move a precedence of item, business, but I can just say, okay, we're moving that forward, and the staff are coming forward.